Introduce yourselves and share one of your earliest memories that captured your interest in your professional field. Ian, we'll start with you, please.
You go left or right?
Right.
I was going to copy what he said. All right. Well, my name's Ian McDonald, and I'm the chair of the computer science department here at St. Rose, and I get to work with Judy as well. We have offices right next to each other. I came to the department 10 years ago, and I've been teaching computer science here the entire time. Before that, I worked in industry as a software engineer, and so I've really been involved in computer science and related disciplines for a while. One of the earliest memories that captured my interest was back in the early 80s, back when Motley Crue first came out, and the dust had just settled from Zeppelin, and my uncle introduced me. I had an uncle who was actually into computers. Back in those days, you really had to look under the hood a little bit to understand how to use a computer. You didn't just turn it on and then you can just point and click and touch and everything happens for you. You become a zombie. You really had to spend serious time learning how to even program to get anything done. To get games to work, you used to actually have to type in a printout of code line by line to get it to work. So I started to input some of these programs, being very young, but that got my interest in computers. Eventually, upgraded my computer to in maybe it was like 1984, 1985. I had an expansion box for this thing that was about the size of a small refrigerator, and it also hooked up to a television set, a regular television set. We didn't have a monitor. There was a television set that it hooked up to. Really kind of bizarre looking. And I have some old pictures. I should have brought some pictures, but that's really what got me interested in this.
I would say I first began to kind of take an interest in technical field or an engineering field probably in shop class in middle school. Believe it or not, we had AC circuits, AC/DC circuits, and besides the normal low voltage, circuit boards and the knife switches and stuff, we had to make household wiring circuits, 120 volt AC circuits with three-way switches and outlets and things like that. And I think what it did for me is really made the theory, made it obvious that the practical application of the theory, where it's still sort of abstract when you're learning the theory, and it's abstract still when you're doing something on a controlled board and controlled knife switches. And once you start putting that into practice and the way that you see it in everyday life, I think that's what really kind of brought it home for me. And then as I kind of advanced in the field from a technical standpoint, I eventually decided that the next step was get my engineering degree, and this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So, and then I gave a tour at a power plant. Here I am.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
We're going down the line this way or that?
I'm Aaron Mariner. I work here at the College of St. Rose as well. My title is Database Administrator, which probably means something slightly different than it might mean in a private sector. I kind of end up being a jack of all trades to an extent. But I help to support the college's administrative software that runs on an Oracle database. So kind of like John was saying, sometimes it's fixing software, sometimes it's fixing people, trying to get people to understand better how to use their software that's available to them. Probably pretty similar to Ian, actually. One of the first things that got me interested was the old Tandy computers back in the day, trying to get to program the computer to draw a circle. That was amazing. It took several commands to get that working, and then you can make it a red circle, and that was great. And somehow that sparked my interest. I'm not sure why exactly, but I tended to like math as well, and I think I sort of looked at it as kind of like a puzzle, and that was sort of appealing to me. I really liked that about it. It was very solvable, something that you could attack like a problem like that. And so then it just sort of spun on from there. I also like the old, in the 80s as well, the old text adventure games like Zork and things like that. And that really, something about, I guess this is really geeky, but something about conversing with the computer and having it talk back to you and then being able to tell the computer what to do and it could respond to you was very appealing to me, and then sort of just went on from there. And so Ended up going to school here for computer information systems. Took classes from these two guys after a while, and got a job here after I graduated undergrad. Been here for about 10 years.
And Sam?
So my name is Sam Bowser. I'm a biologist, and I do work primarily in the ocean, although I study cells. So I study single-celled organisms, usually in the aquatic realm. And my earliest memory, I grew up on a farm, so I was surrounded and immersed and coated with dirt and biology and things like that. So I've always been in this field, I think. I have two very early memories. One was my aunt, my dear great aunt, bought me a toy microscope. And the first time I looked down there, I saw these things coming into the field of view. And I pulled my eyes away and said, what was that? Well, they, of course, were my eyelashes. Those were virtual eyelashes. But to me, they were some kind of wormy creatures, giant wormy creatures coming at me. So that captured my imagination about what the world was like at the microscopic scale. And I've never lost that fascination with that. And the other thing I remember was the blackout of '65. So you guys were just sparkles in the eyes of the gametes of your parental units. But I was alive then, and during the power failure, I was watching the 7 o'clock, or the 4 o'clock movie on Channel 7. I don't know if that's a Time Warner channel now. Am I allowed to say things like that? Well, the movie was Mothra, and I don't know if, yeah, Mothra. I've been instructed that's how it's supposed to be pronounced. Mothra. Well, I'm watching it, and Mothra is spinning. She's still in the cocoon stage, and she's building the cocoon around the Japanese tower that it had toppled. And it's spinning its stuff, shooting out this stuff out of its mouth parts, building its cocoon. And I'm in front of the television like this, and then the lights go out. And I was convinced that Mothra was on. I was screaming, hiding underneath the couch, and. But it dawned on me then that, you know, the movie showed all this technology and all of this stuff going on and all the destruction that was being wrought upon the world. I think that was one of the messages of it. And I thought at that time, well, why don't they just like squirt it with some anti-compound, some anti-moth compound and get rid of the darn thing? And I don't know, at that point, I kind of thought they need better biologists on the planet to prevent these types of things from happening. So anyway, so why did that power system fail? It was just a moth.
I can tell you about the more recent blackout, but I can't tell you about the I wasn't around quite yet. 65.
Well, that's what you're up against, having me on the panel.
What I find interesting with everything you guys have said, it mostly comes down to toys and TV. That piqued your interest. No, I'm kidding about the TV. But just to be allowed to play and to, where's Laura? Where is she? Not that Laura, the other Laura. And to, there she is, and to observe, okay? So, how do we get, I guess the next question I'm trying to lead into, the significance of observation in your field. But I'm really happy to hear that you got your interest by just playing with something or doing something in shop class that, related to life's experience, or looking through a microscope and no one telling you should see this is what you should do. That sort of sparks interest, and we don't seem to have enough time or play to do that. So that was a plug for Laura and Mary. Okay, anyway, observations. So discuss the significance of observations in your field, and in what way do you observe and question in your profession? So how important is it to step back and observe and to see before you do something, whatever. How does the observations play in your field? And I'm looking at the energy man here. We want to know why electricity is in $0 right now. Enough water.
That's right.
Well,
believe me, we're getting paid a lot less than you're paying at your house. The importance of observation, at least in my field, you can't really be overstated. You have everybody drives down the highway and you see the power lines going across. Well, you know, every one of those lines is part of an integrated system. So with the hydros, we have a very small part of that. So we're generating and we interface with that grid. We don't run it. There are people who get paid a lot of money to do that. But for us, I guess the point is that it's your assets, your equipment are spread out all over. So you might only visit a place, you might only be in one particular spot, you know, once a week or every few days. So really, when I drive to work, I mean, I find myself looking at a bunch of different things. I'm looking at water levels, you know, are they where they're supposed to be? If I'm driving along, you know, you become accustomed to seeing certain things and hearing certain things and looking for stuff that's abnormal. So I'm listening for an abnormal hum or a buzz at a transformer or on a high voltage line, or an abnormal vibration in a plant where there's a turbine running, or, you know, we should be having flow under this situation, we don't, or I'm seeing something here and I'm seeing something here, and I'm wondering, all right, are those correlated in some way? It's really it's important just for identifying problems and for predicting failures on pieces of equipment. And to take that a step further, Brookfield's entire safety program really is built on observation. It's we call it hazard identification, but it's observation with some training and some skill sets to equip you to process that information. So if I'm going to go do a job, the first thing I do is I walk up to where I'm going to do it, and I start kind of looking in a radius around myself. Say, all right, well, you know, what could happen in this situation? You know, am I bringing a crane in? Is the crane going to be near the power line? If the crane is going to be near a power line, you know, what kind of barriers can I put up? And that sort of critical thinking, and that's what we even the guy that runs a weed whacker has to do that same sort of analysis when he does a job, and that's all really observation with a tool set. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, you kind of brought my nonsense all together. Yeah, they helped me out.
So John led a tour of our class, and we went to the power plant. I remember the water level, that's something you have to observe, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, like, and then you change things because of the level of the water?
Right. We have we're licensed to operate the facility in a certain way, and we're licensed to do that because you know, a lot of things go into that. One of them is we're trying to maintain the natural habitat as much as possible coming downstream. So there are a lot of regulations. Water levels have to be within a certain band. We have to allow a certain amount of water has to be flowing in a certain section of the river while we're operating. So there are a number of things that we have to monitor, not just to satisfy our license requirements, but because we're being good stewards of the environment, and that's our responsibility. So there are a lot of things like the water level that we have to be very conscious of, and of course, you know, really we're monitoring water level, and then we're transferring a certain amount of that energy into electricity, and there are parameters on how we have to do that, and how much water we bypass the turbines with and send down the river.
Very interesting.
Just jump in, Jim. I don't have to call
Okay,
on you.
I can talk a little bit. There's probably several different ways that observation can come into play, but one of probably the most important ones is to sort of step back from a problem and look at it in a new way, because the software that we use here at the college, we've been using for about 15 years, and it moves on. You know, the software, we get upgrades periodically, and things change. But what tends to happen is that people will sort of get into a rut with what they know already, and so they kind of keep doing things the same way over and over again. And sometimes it may be more efficient to, even though it might take a little work, to stop what you're doing and start again. So a lot of times it comes down to, okay, there's a problem that we have, or there's something else that we would like to do. How can we do that? So you have to sort of step back and look at it, and I really have to look at what the person in the office is doing in a functional office, and try to help them figure out how they can settle this problem in a better way, maybe. And a lot of that comes with translating between a functional person and a technical person, because they know their job way better than I'm ever going to know their job. But I may be able to help them with the technology side, but we have to sort of meet in the middle somewhere. And so I have to look at what they do, I have to look at what they are responsible for, what they need to accomplish, and then help them get there by supporting that technology behind the scenes. So it's really a lot of communication back and forth, and like I said, just sort of getting a feel for what they do every day. That really comes into play a lot, I think.
And if I can answer part of the question, will I still receive partial credit?
Yes, we do in the computer science department.
Well, I see part of the discussion is questioning your profession, observing question, and I think the observation component was answered quite well by Aaron. And one of the things that we're constantly doing in the field of computer science is questioning, and if we stop questioning, we stop advancing. And by questioning, how can we make this faster? How can we get around this computational complexity? There might be a problem that's too computational. You can't even say computational. It's too computationally complex to solve in a finite amount of time. So you figure, okay, well, there's got to be another way around this. We keep asking questions, we keep making advances, come up with heuristics, and it's very important in our field to constantly question. How can we make this device smaller, faster? How can we make the screen resolution better? How can we write better drivers? And this is something that constantly comes up in our field, and it's very important. Like I said, if we stop questioning, we'd stop advancing. So.
Could answer this in 5
Words or less?
6 words. 6 words. My job is to question and observe.
No, there's the end.
That's an ampersand.
Slash.
Slash.
Yeah.
No, that's what I do. That's what scientists do. If you don't question and observe, then you're a really crappy scientist.
Okay, we'll move on.
And I have met a few of those non-questioning, non-observing types.
We sort of did 2 and 3, so we'll go back to 3, but I guess because I'm always curious about 4 because we're in a room full of teachers. What advice would you give a teacher in order to motivate a student in the STEM studies? This I find particularly interesting because I have students and I just don't understand why they don't want to spend time and figure out what's wrong with the program or figure out what's wrong with the math problem. Why they're not like, figure out this puzzle, isn't this interesting? And I don't know how, other than raising my voice. I don't really, and this is a question I always want to ask people in the industry. How do you think you motivate a student? And ask you teachers this too. I mean, to me that seems to be the hardest thing even at a college level. Even at a graduate level, you always get, yes, is this going to be on the test? Right? I mean, how do you get away from that?
We still have panelists who ask that.
You're right. Here's my fault.
I agree. That's extremely challenging, and we can't just come up with a solution to that and keep reusing it, unfortunately, because eventually your way of motivating students wears out after a little while. I find the only way I'm able to get students motivated is to find a way to apply what they're learning to them. So, for example, a lot of students come into college, actually a lot of students, every student that comes into college has some sort of smartphone. So to be able to teach, potentially be able to teach how to write programs for that smartphone in computer science is a way to get them interested, because they all play the games and they all have the device. So you already have two things working for you. So to be able to teach them maybe how to write a game for that, maybe how to design a website that's accessible through a mobile device is one way to make that connection. But it's very challenging because 5-6 years ago, cell phones weren't capable of this. So we're trying to motivate students by teaching them how to write computer games or to to interact with a laptop or computer, and that's not as interesting anymore to these students. So you have to keep inventing new ways.
Are we allowed to ask questions of the audience?
Well, excuse us, let's vote. Can they ask you questions? Okay.
So I'm just curious whether or not these devices are allowed in classrooms now, K through 6.
What do you mean?
Well, like the mobile phones and these. How much technology is allowed in the classroom?
Netbooks.
I'm raising my hand.
You.
I think I'm the youngest one here, so that's probably why I raised my hand. Well, every morning on the announcements, the principal would say, no devices that have an on and off switch are allowed in school. So no cell phones, MP3 players, any sort of technology. They're allowed to use the computers that the classrooms have or in the computer lab, but otherwise no phones, just because they become a distraction. And I actually had an incident where I was subbing for a teacher and my phone was taken off of a desk, even though it was in a very discreet spot, because the student thought that it was his, that the teacher had taken away the day before. So that became an incident. So now it's no phones, and students bring them anyway, but they have to keep them shut off during the course of the day. So that would be a little harder for, as far as elementary school is concerned. That might be more of an initiative for high school students, however, because I'm not sure what they're doing over there in terms of administrative.
But I think in a lot of the elementary schools, it's the safety issues and the texting and other things that go on. So it's not necessarily the technology stuff, but how it's being used that you're protecting the children from, and that, and also they compare answers. So, but it's not that they're not familiar with it. Not that the kids have the iPads and everything at home, but it's a lot of it is a safety.
There are students with nicer phones than what I have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if I could just interject, it's not just, I use the example of cell phones for high school / college students. When you get into elementary students, I have a daughter in high school and I have a daughter in elementary school, and the things that they're interested in, although there's commonalities, there's some much different interests. And in elementary schools, I've seen, for example, a lot of schools starting to use these Lego Mindstorms. As another way, because Lego Mindstorm, kits can be kept in a controlled environment. Likewise, in high school, you can have a controlled, I don't know how easy that is, but a controlled lab where you have phones that are used just for the programming while in that lab. You don't bring your own phone in, you don't toy with it and keep writing your program during English class. Oh, that's probably what I would do.
Because one of the things that we've run into is the smart boards. There's a smart response system, and they've written a program now where you can access it from an iPad or a mobile phone and do the test, do the survey, and still get that real-time data. So it's nice because where I work, we were talking about getting tablets so we could have that real-time data and lock those down and still control those at the same time. So it's actually really interesting because the kids are really interested in using the smartphones, because we do have the Mindstorms and we do have the WeDo for the littler kids, and have all that stuff where they can just pick it up and go, okay, that test, okay, that problem answer is B, and they tap B and hit next, and the teacher automatically knows how many people got that right. It's amazing.
And that also depends so much on budgets and the teacher training, and it still varies on the classroom environment, equipment, and what am I going to say? What's the teacher? There's another name for teacher. One of the resources in the classroom, how well trained they are.
Some of us have those smart systems in our classrooms because of a grant, a scale grant, and we have netbooks as well for the students to use, and they want them to take them home, but that's not a good idea. So they use them at school, and the challenge is getting them to stay in the right place. They want to go to Facebook and YouTube and all these places, but yes, that's the challenge.
No, it's not. It's not blocked.
No, it's not blocked.
It's not.
They have a way of getting around it too.
Teacher too.
So
I know the elementary school, they can't access it. At least I don't think they can.
There's a code that you can type in to get around the
So my
block.
question is, we have, and I don't know where you were leading, so I might have missed. My question is, we have this technology, why is our STEM going down the tube? Why are our students why are they coming in with less skills? I actually probably have people throw things at me, but I just assume you get rid of all the technology and actually teach them how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. I mean, the toys are fun and I think they spark interest, but I think we need to get back to, in college, I see 10, they'll have 10 divided by 2, and I see people grabbing their calculators. I've actually thrown my son's calculator across the room, but he's studying electrical engineering. He doesn't have a calculator anymore, but that's my question to you. We keep introducing all this fancy stuff, and I do agree that it's really fun, and left to a kid to do whatever they want with is, I think, awesome. But we still need the fundamentals. So I'm sorry if I made enemies.
Well, what I believe is that we've set the kids up for failure. And the reason that I said this is because we have something that's called a pacing map. And we have to teach a certain amount of stuff at a certain amount of time. Whether this guy gets it, if he gets it, fine. If not, we have to move on because of the pacing map. So
that's what you're saying is killing it.
Also, I know at the elementary school level,
We have technology time where you have it and we're in a computer lab. Really, a lot of teachers will have their kids on the computers, and in the meantime, they're doing their own classroom work that they don't get to. It's almost like another prep, and they're using the computers as babysitters, just the way moms supposedly were using TV to babysit kids. So they're using the technology mostly. Yes, it's supposed to be a tool to help the kids learn because you've got spelling city and first in math and those sorts of things, but you're not teaching the kids how it works. It becomes entertainment for them as opposed to an actual tool that you can utilize in different ways. And that's where we're, I think, failing them because we're sticking kindergartens on them to do that sort of thing. So you gotta just change the outlook.
I think that also feeds into that 5 seconds, and I had to go on to something else.
Yeah.
And absolutely. And I teach far less than I did when I started 30-some years ago. The expectations, I'm going to throw the state in, but the standardized tests from a long time ago, they kept on dropping the baseline, what was acceptable, and dropped it. And a lot of us now is you only have to teach to what the state says. Heaven forbid you should go over that. And so there's been a drop in expectations, and they're now trying to get everybody caught up to it. But we have the kids are on the computers, and they have that 5-second, attention span, and you have to go on the next. And I love some of the computer games. It does help them with the kids going to reading and diagnosis problems for them, but they still are going every 5 seconds. There's a new image on the computer. So, and why think something out when you can go have fun on a screen someplace? So I don't know.
Could I just interject about computers at our school? Our teachers don't use that as a prep time. It has never been a prep time. Our teachers come in, they're hands-on, they stay with the curriculum. If it's something that they want their students to expand upon, they email me, they come with the lesson, we expand upon it. Our computer lab is used to enhance the curriculum, and the teacher comes and works, and we have extra resource time. It's not play, it's strictly sticking with the curriculum.
I'm part of the grant that we have for all the computer equipment, and I think part of it is it's a huge shift as being a facilitator versus a teacher, and it's a big shift for us to learn how to teach them differently, but also have those explorations like we had yesterday where there was minimal electronics, where they were hands-on and stuff that made them question and have inquiry, where I've seen it before when I've given them the electronics too soon. All they want to do is just, Google this, Google that, and they're not even filtering any of that information. They're writing down definitions that are 14 lines long, and they don't have a clue what half the words are. So you have to facilitate, but it takes a lot of work to do that well. And to shift to saying, go ask your group to see what they want to, what you think and what anyone else thinks, and start thinking about it together. And they don't want that. They want, you're the teacher, you're getting paid for this, you need to tell me the answer now. And it's very hard. It's painful sometimes to say, go talk to your group. You know, it's very hard for me to not answer that because I want to answer them. It's a big shift, and it's going to take some time.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and to go along with that, the thinking aspect, they want us to think for them. To give them the answer and just give them everything so they can regurgitate it. That's not teaching. That is not teaching. So there has to be a change in the way that we do things. Where do we start?
I don't know. That's
I don't know.
here.
I don't know.
I remember when I first started teaching way back, it was more of a thematic approach. It wasn't this entity of subject, subject, subject. And also, like in Albany, we do have these page maps. So in reading, you may be doing frog and toad stories, but you're not really going to get into that until maybe further on down the year. So the kids are learning in segments. Whereas when I used to do a thematic approach and you would build all your core area subjects in, there was connections. They could kind of interlink those different areas, and it wasn't such a segment of science, or this is reading, or this is social studies. It kind of all blended in, and it made more sense that way. So I think having that whole kind of theory or concept of doing a theme and building off and going into the different branches just makes it so much easier for them to understand how to connect real world.
The funny thing is, in graduate school, that is what you learn how to do, and that's what I've been talking to a lot of teachers about. We learned how to do thematic units. During student teaching, I didn't even get to do mine because we had to prepare for the 4th grade state exams. I did 2 lessons, and then I had to do an evaluation on it. Couldn't evaluate my unit because we did 2 lessons.
And that's the thing, the state tests are all about regurgitation. They're not about synthesis. They're not about application. They discourage you from using your own prior knowledge. They discourage you from synthesizing and putting it all together. They'll give you 4 articles, and they really encourage you to just puke back what those articles have said. So how do we expect students to want to discover, to want to learn, to want to try, when all we're asking them to do almost all the way through their schooling years is just dump it back at us? It doesn't jive with what we need in today's society.
I'd like to get back to something that you said, and that was going and asking your peers or your group about that. My experience has been that my students lack the social skills to work together. They spend a lot of time at home individually interacting with their computer games, and they don't know how to work together as a group to solve a problem, and they get in these arguments and fights. And so I step in and kind of have to teach them those social skills of working together before we can get anything done.
To address your question about the engineering piece, the state, they should change their focus, or because for the state test, we focus on reading and math. A very small portion of science. Very small. So.
It seems like everyone's saying that it's difficult to teach with the current tests that are in place, right? And so that's difficult. And I don't know how you get around that. And I guess maybe that's something we have to think about, because I think they're going to be with us for a while. I don't think Obama is making a change that will affect your lives. So.
Why was that question asked from your point of view?
Well,
I'm curious because it's sort of.
I've sat on panels, and I don't want to be too disrespectful of technology, of course, because my work depends on it. But we seem to have been removed from the world that we live in. We really have. And students have been removed from the world that they live in. It's too dangerous. Oh, you might get bitten. You might catch poison ivy. Some weirdo's going to pick you up off the street. You know, we've locked our children away, and we've offered them the way to avoid the world, and that is through technology. They can just sit on their smartphone all day. And I've seen brilliant, brilliant, brilliant young people completely immersed in this the entire time that I've been in the room talking, in the class, not in the classroom, but at these people's
It's a cool wallet.
This is what... An empty wallet.
I like that.
But here's a picture of my wife.
That's good.
I did pretty good. And I'm just thinking that if the product that I want is a kid whose eyes are open and whose mind is open and who's curious. How does this help them? How does this help them get to that point? I don't know how. I think somebody said the word. It's entertainment. Kids want to be entertained. They don't want to learn. Yeah. They want to be entertained. So you have to trick them into learning stuff while you're entertaining them, I guess. Is the answer.
That's why they invented Sesame Street.
Yeah. But so I don't know what the answer is at all. My observation is this is what I observed.
And I can also add to that too. Students coming into to college are becoming. It's 2011, and students are becoming less and less prepared, and they know less and less about technology. Now think about what I'm saying. It's 2011, and students coming into their first year in college know less about technology than students who came in 10 years ago. And the reason being, I think, goes right back to the fact that these technology and these devices are so easy to use. You don't need to look under the hood. And I'm going to go back to what I said when I first started this panel. When I got my interest in computer science in the field, in technology and science, all because I had to look under the hood. There was no choice. These devices are becoming so easy to use that we sort of become zombies in front of the devices. And you don't need to teach a kid how to use a computer anymore. You used to have to. Now you don't. They already know how to use a computer. So it's becoming very difficult to get the students interested in, okay, well, why does this work? And how does it work? And how can we improve this? That's a real challenge. So students, yes, they're coming in and they know how to use Microsoft Word, and they know how to navigate the internet, and Lord knows they don't know how to Google and use Wikipedia very well. But they don't understand how a computer works, whereas 10 years ago they did, and it's a challenge.
That's a natural progression. You keep using the metaphor to look under the hood. Who looks under the hood of their cars?
Exactly.
Who knows how a car works anymore? Who works on their own car?
Exactly, and the analogy that I give,
The old guy sitting at the
and the analogy that I give to a lot of students is think about how hard it would be to find a good mechanic if the only experience mechanics ever had with cars was driving them. They wouldn't be very good at fixing them or improving them. So they need, and Rick, it's an excellent point. They need to look under the hood. You can't just drive them. You can't just use them.
Could you hook up your car to a computer now and figure out how to
You can text your car. Your car can text you and say, hey, I need an oil change.
Interesting. I think it's interesting, and just the last comment, the traveling salesman thing that you guys really liked, and you said, well, can we change it? And I really hesitated because I wanted the students to see the resistors. To see the wires, to see all that, and that's sort of my attempt to get a little bit under the hood, to see how the electricity flows. So that's sort of why I wasn't being mean. I was like, I really don't want to change this thing, because I agree with Ian. I mean, our students come in and they actually get angry when their programs don't work, and they tell me the computer's not working. And I said, that's amazing, it doesn't work for you today, right? Because they're so used to that instant response. So how do we get away from it? But you can't take technology away. I mean, I would, many times I wish kids would just play. You know, they did a whole
Outside.
Yeah, outside. They
In the
did,
water.
Yeah, they did a whole study
Up a
of-
tree.
Yeah, of that outdoor activity helps their growth. Duh.
Without this.
Yeah. But I guess the question is, how do you use technology, because it's there, and we want them to be able to go to the power plant and be able to handle the technology, but also be able to use their brain. And that's, I think, what we're all dealing with, is the balance. I guess that's my one word, the balance.
How do they know when it's not working right? And you mentioned you wanted them to see the resistors and everything. Just one memory burned into my brain from teaching freshman physics lab one afternoon. Some students in a lab group called to me and they said, "Dr. Thompson, should our power supply be smoking?" They stopped and they asked me, "Should smoke be coming out of the back of this thing?"
And you answered, of course!
You're lost. Electricity looks
Anybody else want to comment on your advice you would give a teacher? I'm not going to ask Aaron because he was in my class. Or should we move on?
What I was going to say was to try to make the experience real, to try to make it practical and not so abstract. And then what I'm hearing is really what we're doing is creating a world where all these ideas are more and more abstract, and that's I think that really that's the problem. You guys phrase it a different way, but somehow you have to make it what they're learning real and applicable to their everyday life and to what they think that they may want to do in the future. Somehow it has to hit home. Why do I need to know this? How am I going to use this in the future? I think if you can answer those questions, at least for some kids, if you make it practical and logical, you get a little bit further with it. But,
coming from an elementary perspective, I was thinking about this afterwards. I think if you hadn't called it traveling salesman and set up the thing like, oh, the salesman has to go to each city, and if it didn't have that and it was just get from A to B to C, whatever, with just the wires and all that, I think it would have turned me off, and I'm thinking about children too. But the fact that you brought it down and you made it interesting, I'm thinking that just not to lose that little kid aspect of, you have to have a way to make it so it's going to be interesting to the kids. So, I'm just thinking from a third grade point of view, if it was just the wires, if it didn't have that little map, if it didn't have the little thing about the salesman, it would have been daunting. You know what I'm saying? But it was very simple, just to make it cutesy like that. You know?
It was the hook, yes, thank you. You know what it makes me think of? I have a little 2-year-old grandson who lives with us, and right now he's at the stage where when he looks at something, he's down on the ground and he goes, "Oh, wow." And somehow we lose that "oh, wow," and we don't let them go and experiment and do things, or we're so busy we put them in front of the TV, or we give them something else to do instead of some of those experiences that would keep that "oh, wow" developing.
I just think it takes too long.
It takes a lot of time, reading stories and doing all that stuff, and I think that's another issue we're dealing with, just family structures and the timing, and parents taking time to do things with their children.
It's just keeping that wonder
Things we're talking about as far as like standardized testing, like we're not looking for somebody to come in and make check marks on their resume and say, I can do this, and this. I want you to be able to see something, analyze it, and figure out why it's working that way, and if you need to change it or not. It's great if you know those things, but really probably it's more important if you are maybe a little weaker there, but a better problem solver. That's really what we're looking for, is somebody who can think. Not just regurgitate something like you guys are talking about. Somebody who can analyze something, figure it out. Like I said, figure out if it's working right, if it's working wrong, what could be done better. That's really what we're looking for. In fact, over the last few rounds of interviews, we've taken things off of the resume because we don't want people to just say, "Yep, I can do that," and then so I'm going to apply for this job. Well, can you? How good are you at some of these other things? And then sometimes they don't have as good answers for those kinds of things. So that's really what we're looking for as a problem solver.
Did you look at my cheat sheet? That's exactly, almost word for word. You have to, I mean, there are some boxes that you have to check. You need some background information, you need the tool set, but really, engineering is just problem solving with a bigger toolbox. It's at the root of it. You have to be able to observe, you have to be able to analyze, you have to be able to come up with a solution. And you know, essentially, you have to be able to identify and solve a problem. And you know, whatever discipline you're in, it's just a different set of tools that you're going to use to solve the problem.
And if we change the word employee to student, which again, a lot of my students would love to be able to change the question and then answer the new one. What I'm looking for in an entry-level STEM student, you know, someone looking to go into these kind of fields, is exactly what has been said by my colleagues up here. But also, can they innovate? You know, here's all the existing solutions. Come up with a new one, or in addition to problem solving, innovation. And you know, that I think really shows a student who's interested and wants to learn and wants to invent and create.
I also like someone to teach me something. I mean, tell me something I don't know already. That's what I sit at my desk most of the time, and I bring a student in. Well, first of all, I employ from like kindergarten all the way up. Not employ in the sense of, here's your paycheck.
Wait a
The state of New York.
Where's the state laws on that one?
I'm not allowed to do that. But they're going to pay for me in terms of their time and their attention and their interest. And at I don't care what age group or whatever is in my lab or in my research program. I want to learn something from them. I want to find out what they're interested in, and I would like to tailor their experience to their interests. So that's my goal at some point. And that goes from my postdocs down to the little squirts who might end up working with me.
None of you have mentioned a risk taker. Do you ever look at...
You know what, I think that would go along with the innovator.
Do you?
Because if you're innovating and you're constantly seeking new solutions, you are a risk taker.
Okay.
You're willing to take that risk.
Yeah.
Because I always look for that in a student. I want someone, I even say, guess, I don't care, just take a guess if you have nothing. But as an employer, you guys don't look for the person that's willing to step out there just a little bit outside the box?
With my $600,000 microscope? No risks allowed.
But you know when okay.
Well, we ask people, you know, so we have, like I said, there's a toolbox of things that you might need to do, but then something that isn't on the resume will say, well, what if we said this to you? How would you react to that? You know, so you're looking for somebody that says, yeah, I'll try to get into that, or I don't know a lot about it right now, but I'll dive into it. So it's kind of like that, I guess, in a way. You know, something outside your comfort zone. You know, okay, you don't have this on your resume. What if we said you have to do this? What would you do? You know, that sort of thing.
Do you see that the ability to grow and change in your job too? I mean, I thought this was how we solved the problem, so maybe that's your innovation, but the willingness to always grow and change in a position you not looked at for entry level, but
oh, absolutely, yeah.
So,
it's kind of what I was saying. Like, what if we told you to do something and it was on your resume? How do you react to that? Is that something that excites you, or are you like, I don't want to do that? You know.
So then, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because we get both.
I have a question. Do you find in your fields that there are more men applying or men that are working in your fields? And if that is the case, what do you think is drawing men to doing technology, to doing biology, than women? Because that's just something that we've been asked along the line, and they're trying to push women and girls to be interested. And I'm just seeing like a tension with what I think is right, what may not be right. So I just want to hear what you guys have to say on that.
That's a hard question to answer. And there's been a lot of research done. I know you're probably aware of a lot of this research, but certainly some from Carnegie Mellon with the development of the ALICE program. If you ever read the last lecture by Randy Posh, he was also involved in that, the development of ALICE, which was the goal of that program was to obtain interest in middle school girls in the STEM field. And there's a lot of research, a lot of money that's gone into that. I can tell you very little. I can't really answer the question, but I know I have two girls and a boy, and obviously the girls are much different. The girls are very interested in stories, in being able to create,
terms of my field, do animations is very, very interesting. Be able to have some kind of control over story or something like that, they find to be very, very interesting. So Alice has been successfully. Both my girls use Alice in the house and write their own little programs and stuff, but that's only my 2 kids, so I can only speak for them. So I don't know how to answer that question in terms of, you know, how do we get more girls interested in the field, how more women into the field, because it's very unbalanced.
Do you think the skill sets for your jobs are tended more for the abilities of men?
No, not our job.
Okay, so
there's no physical requirements that would.
The way men think. I mean, there are differences in approaching how men and women.
Our field's probably better suited for women.
Probably better suited.
I would say, based on what I've seen, and I'm probably getting in trouble with my male colleagues here, but I've noticed at least the women that I know have a lot of attention to detail. I'll wear the same pair of pants every Wednesday and not realize it until someone points it out. I've noticed that women have a lot of attention to detail, and in our field that is huge. So I would even say that our field is perfect for women, and we need more women in our field. It would improve our field.
I see a lot of girls really, really involved and interested and actually have much more ability in middle school. But I think somehow they got lost in high school. I definitely see a very large population in middle school, but I don't know what happens after that.
So we blame you because we see great interest in elementary school when they get to middle school.
It's disproportionate of how many girls are actively involved and really have hands-on and really want to push to get problems solved and are interested. And I don't know what happens. I don't either.
I have 3 daughters and 1 son. And all of my daughters are interested. One is an architect, one is a marine biologist, thanks to Sam. And one is, one is in communications, so I guess not, but also, and I believe that their interest stems from my introducing them to things at a very young age. And so that's why I am so such a strong advocate for working with elementary school teachers, because I feel like you really, really the middle school thing though, I did watch. My one daughter graduated at the top of her class in middle school, and then there were bullies. And all of a sudden, it wasn't so cool to be smart. And so she backed off a little bit. And fortunately, she struggled with it, I would say. I wouldn't say she backed off, but she struggled with it because she could see, you know, how do I make this work together? You know, how can I be smart and get a boyfriend?
You're a smart guy.
And so, anyway, I think that's part of the issue, is that they don't see themselves as quite as attractive as when they're as smart as they are. And we have to make it, I guess, make it clear that smart is cool, you know? I love the way the nerd thing has kind of gotten cooler.
Yep.
You know, I love that. Yeah, the same daughter came to St. Rose for
Work for me.
Science Olympiad. And the head of their group made all these signs that she put all over her room. You know, nerd is cool, and all these things, and it really it was good for her. And so I think that those are 2 issues. I don't know, but I am a strong advocate for getting those kids to have experiences that are positive with science. And because I study biology, I believe that that means they got to get outside and they got to see those things. So that's one of the reasons that we felt 5 Rivers was so important for you. You know, you got to get outside, you got to be comfortable, and then you got to get those kids out.
I have a question for the panel. What are you looking for as far as interpersonal skills are concerned, and what are you seeing with job applicants that come to you and their ability to work together and relate to each other?
I'd love to answer that. that. So in my 25 years of dealing with students coming into the laboratory, I've gone from kids who, and this is 25 years ago, kids who were very tentative, pretty much afraid of everything around them, to students today walk in there like this, they're the CEOs of major corporations. They have an incredible skill set in terms of their demeanor and their interactions with each other. I was actually a little bit surprised by some of the comments about kids not knowing how to work with each other. By the time they come into the laboratory, they are excellent orators, they're excellent presenters, they are excellent at promoting themselves and their interests. It really is a shocking transition. And I first got a taste of that at a local school for girls, where I was a judge in a science panel, science fair. Sixth graders were presenting their data better than my graduate students were. Incredibly gifted at and skilled at presenting their work. I thought, holy cow, this is a real sea change that's occurring. Because suddenly kids are now articulate, they can't write, they can't spell. If you ask them to make a 1% solution of sodium chloride, they look at you like you have a Time Warner symbol on your forehead, a third eye up here or something. But they're incredibly confident. So we've done something to turn them into, I don't know, like self-esteem types of creatures, almost adults. They're 6-year-old, 30-year-olds almost in the laboratory. So that's one thing that I've seen over the years. We've done a really good job at that.
One thing
really good.
I saw Waiting for Superman way back when it came out, and the one thing that Americans do excel at is self-confidence. So,
Even though the scores, I remember
our
that
scores are low, but we excel at self-confidence.
We look, that's a really important thing for us. I mean, that's one of the first things an interviewee leaves the room, we wait, we sit and talk about it. One of the first things we talk about is can this person go out to the offices and interact with them and figure out what's going on? Because sometimes, probably maybe in the higher ed, it's a little more unique than in like a private software firm or something. But we are very active with the end user. So if you're not going to be a person sitting at a desk, heads down, coding and not talking to anybody. You have to be able to talk to somebody and translate, like I was talking before. They might not know what you're talking about. You may be asking them questions that they have no idea the answer to. But you have to be able to bridge that gap somehow. And so that's a really, really important thing for us, to be able to talk to an end user, understand what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish, and then make that translation for them sometimes. So yeah, that's a huge deal. Absolutely. And sometimes we have people that are really good at it, and sometimes we have people that aren't as good at it.
What role does, we're running out of time, creativity play in your field?
It's huge for us. Like I said, I mean, we try to, the goal of what we do is to try to make people's jobs easier, quicker, more efficient, faster, better. And if you continue to kind of stay in a rut and do the same thing over and over again, it's not going to be any of those things. And so it's a matter of looking at an existing situation, an existing solution, or a problem that's been there forever, and trying to find a better way to get at it, or to solve it, or to fix it. It's constantly trying to come up with new ways to do things. It's sort of like innovation, like you were talking about before. Don't just say, okay, well, this is what you have, deal with it. Well, what if we did something else? What if we built something else on top of that? So it's constant creativity, absolutely. And that's, I guess, and that goes back to why I was interested in the field in the first place. It's like a puzzle. You have to try to figure out how to put all those pieces together in the best way, or make new pieces if you can't get them to fit.
So, I would say the same thing as Aaron said. Every puzzle, every problem has constraints, and sometimes the simple solution doesn't fit the constraints. There's something else in the way, or it costs too much to do this, or the timing isn't right, and even though you might be solving the same problem, you've got different constraints the second time, and sometimes you have to adapt your approach, or you have to come up with a way that you can do it to fit inside those constraints. And, you know, sometimes you don't really, you know, maybe you don't always like the way you have to do it, or maybe it's not a long-term solution, but it best fits what you're working on. And I think, you know, I think creativity plays a big part in that. You have to be, you can't be stuck in doing it the same way that you've always done it, because, you know, obviously that's not working, because we're still here today. We still have the same problem. So, you know, let's find a new way to address it. So, and it kind of goes into your fear of failure. I wouldn't have worded it quite as risk-taking, because we're a risk-averse company, but but you can't be afraid to fail. You know, you got to, you know, even if, you know, I encourage guys, you know, give me an idea, you know, throw it out there. Let's see if it sticks to the wall. I mean, you know, I would rather you do that than, you know, than just do the way you've always done it, or say I can't come up with it and throw your hands up and walk away.
Yeah, or sometimes you get into something they call like analysis paralysis, where you're trying to solve this problem, and like you said, you aren't just going to like try it. You got to figure it out. You got to do the best way you're going to do it. Well, sometimes you have to iterate on it. Sometimes you have to try something first, and it doesn't work, and you go from there. You know.
And oftentimes we have a really restricted tool set that a programmer has to use in order to solve a problem. You know, and the analogy I use when I tell my students is the other day I hung a bunch of pictures in my office, and all I have in my office door is a little screwdriver. I got to hammer nails into the wall. You turn a screwdriver around, you can, you know, just get those nails into the wall. Well, oftentimes.
I think something fell in your office.
I think it did. That was when you were yelling, probably, the sound waves. But I got to get some more nails. But a lot of times programmers are restricted to make this software work for this solution, and that takes a lot of creativity. And I'm sure, you know, Aaron can expand on this. There have been solutions that we've had to deal with at the college, that I've had to deal with in industry, where the solution doesn't necessarily fit the problem that we bought the solution to fit. And we have to be very creative as programmers to find workarounds, to find little back doors and ways to make certain things work. And, and sometimes it's just reusing an unused field to take on a different meaning in a database, because that's all we have. So it's very important.
Sam?
Can you turn the camera off for 1 minute? So I work for government, and I work with multiple government agencies, and I work with contractors who get government contracts. And I think the most creativity that is required in my job is to figure out how to get around restrictions to getting something done.
Did you get that? He's got a $600,000 microscope. We can sell it. Sorry, Sam.
Let's just edit that out.
You might have to.
Disguise his voice.
Yeah. So creativity is obviously one of the key parts of science, and corporate creativity, or thwarting corporate restrictions and government restrictions, is also necessary. And I wish I had not said that.
But that's what it's all about. I've already said it. You have some
problem
kind of
solving.
restriction, and you've got to get around it.
Right. And usually
Any kind of situation, yeah.
nature has infinite problems, and somehow our system has set up even more infinite problems.
Sam, can I ask you a question? If you come up, well, I was thinking physics, because last time I was watching the Stephen Hawking thing. As you come up with a new idea or a different idea that does not go with the old things, there's a lot of resistance to that, though, in science, and changing that. So it's not rewarded in the short term.
Oh, absolutely not.
So
But
it's a long struggle.
But that's where science is self-correcting. It will be. I mean, tomorrow you will abandon an idea. You have to be prepared for that, and you have to accept your interpretation of data, and that's what it's all about. So that part of it is a good thing, because it doesn't. I mean, certainly totalitarianism exists in science, and there are old codgers who will insist, I don't care what your data says, I know I'm right about this. And some of them are very famous people, and it's hard to, but you just ignore them and you move on. That's what I do.
I think what Sam said is amazing, because these students really cannot be afraid to be wrong. And I find in my own kids, a lot of times they're afraid that their solution's not going to work, or they're afraid that their idea is going to be bad, so they don't bring it forward. And I think it's really important that we emphasize it to these kids. There's, it may not work, and that's okay, but, I mean, there's no scientist batting 1,000 with their ideas. And that's important to relay.
Try it,
But-
learn from it.
But they need to get the correct grade on their tests.
Yeah, A for effort.
And, the teacher had better make sure that the kids get the A in their tests. Otherwise, they're going to get booted out. So, I mean, we are kind of setting ourselves up for failure, especially with some of the so-called reforms in education that are coming down the pipeline.
Is that camera still on?
Every government moron who's coming up with these things is paying attention. Stupid.
I think in response.
What happens when you run into a student, or I know as far as my limited science, because no, this is the answer, but maybe they've actually discovered something that I don't know. I mean, at what point, like was it elementary? Well, black holes, I've been selecting. So, thinking so. But, so at the point of what teachers have affected the creativity, because you're like, well, no, that doesn't fit in my mindset of what, even if you look back at biology, 30, 40 years ago, we didn't know about certain things, and life forms can only be formed in carbon-based and all that stuff, and those things are being challenged. So what point does a teacher have in stemming that or stopping the creativity? Because you'll say, no, that's wrong, because this is the answer in the book.
Well, there are some answers. I mean, 1% sodium chloride is 1% sodium chloride. You can't invent that.
No, but I'm saying, like, if you come up with a different idea and we are stuck in this is what I know about biology.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, if I could just elaborate on one example. So the research we've done in our lab has shown that these one-celled organisms will capture and consume shrimp and scallops and sea urchins, and they would capture and they would eat a mammal were it not for the placenta and a mom that's way too big to consume, right? So the ecosystem, the marine ecosystem, works completely backwards from what's in the textbooks. Totally backwards.
Wow.
But when I talk to kids about this, I say, however, you're going to be given a test multiple times throughout your career, and the answer you must put down on the test is that big things eat smaller things, eat smaller things, eat smaller things, because that's the way that the textbooks are written, and that will be the correct answer, and you will get a good grade. But you're smarter than those books, because you now know that here's the data. I'm showing it to you. Here's the data. And that's not the way it works. Kids get a kick out of that. They really do. Like, oh, I know something that the books don't get.
And they'll remember it.
And they'll remember it. Yeah. And they'll damn me for the rest of their lives, because they'll put down what they know is the right answer, not what the book tells them to put down. So it's a very interesting thing to see and participate in. And it'll take a decade or two to turn that textbook around, probably. Whatever.
Well, one thing that I think in science in particular, and maybe in all subjects, when we rely on a textbook, like then there are answers. If you do more discovery and open-ended things, then there may not be an answer. You need to investigate questions versus reading a textbook or do questions in a textbook. So I think textbooks really limit what we can do as teachers. So limits my
So it's a framework. That's all it is. It's a framework. And the inquiry allows the students to be explorers.
But you need the framework.
Yeah. I'm not taking it away.
I'm a little uncomfortable with your last statement, Mary, about textbooks. I mean, I prefer that a student knows how to use a textbook. Now,
but if it's a textbook that's proved in the state
that
of
I
Texas,
like,
I would prefer to have
you're
it
right.
thrown
I'm
away.
sorry.
But in science, I think students think that science is a textbook.
I see what you're saying.
And they don't understand how the information got there. And then it was individual people having questions and many hours of time to just get one line. And so that's what I think.
college level, it's so important to get students involved in research, because there is no answer to back the book. My first real research project in graduate school, when I got down to the point of figuring something out, and I realized nobody knows the answer. Say to the hell out of it. Don't know what the answer is, and I'm supposed to come up with it and be able to defend that answer.
But that's the exact thing that should be taught from, I don't know,
Square one.
like embryonic stage on up until administrative stage.
It's the same thing you're talking about with the technology. You know, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. You just have the smartphone that can do everything. You don't have to know how it works. It just does it for you. You know, you don't have to understand it. You're given the answer right there. Same thing you're talking about.
And to expand on that, and when I was in grad school, I remember studying for one of my qualifying exams. We had a whole lot of questions that we had to work on. A lot of them were proofs, and I remember working on one of these problems for an entire week. Just constantly plugging away. And I finally went to the professor and said, you know what, I'm dying over here. You got to help me out. And kind of snickered and said, there's no solution for that problem. But I learned more while sweating over that problem, in terms of how to be innovative, how to come up with a solution and say, oh crap, that's wrong, but you know what, I can carve that little piece off and to try this. I learned more from that one problem that had no solution, which is mean, by the way. It was evil. But I learned more from that than I did from the problems where I was able to solve them in a half hour, and come with a proof, and then look and find it in a book. It was so there's something to be said about that.
Were we talking about failures? Yeah.
We persevere in.
Yeah. Right. And failures come success. With each failure, there's a success. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Keep right. That's all right. Well, a couple of things, and this kind of goes, we're kind of going in a little bit of a circle or circling back, but I remember I remember science when I'm dating myself a little bit, but I remember science. The textbook presented things as theories. Everything was a theory. This is a theory of this. It's a theory of that. It's a theory. It's a theory. It's a theory. If I open my kid's science book, it doesn't say that. It says this is how it happened. I said, well, wait a minute. What happened today was a theory. Somehow over the last 20 years, we've decided it's not a theory now. We're going to present this as fact. We're going to say, and we're going to say this is what happened, and then you're going to regurgitate that on a test. What happened to it? What happened to it being a theory? What happened to it being maybe an alternate theory or a competing theory, or are we still encouraging kids to question stuff? I don't know the answer to that.
We've lost ownership of that word, though, because now you hear people use it. Well, that's just a theory. Okay. You watch the Law and Order shows. They got the witness on. Well, sir, what do you think happened? Blah, blah, blah. Well, that's a theory, right? And there's scientists on the witness stand. Well, isn't that just a theory? Well, yes, it is. Well, theory means something to a scientist. But well, that is just a theory. And then the jury box goes, it's just a theory. Yeah. But, so that may be one of the things they've done is they're trying to show that, well, no, we actually do know this stuff. Third grader, they take that word out because there's a negative connotation on the screen.
But there's still infinite unknowns, and that's the part that has been lost. And I think kids should have their, but they should have their nose rubbed in the unknown.
I think that also goes to problem solving, and I teach math, and I encourage so much more of having students share different answers for the same question. I want them to share them with each other to see that it's not just one way. And that's very hard, because there are kids that won't put their pencil in the paper unless if they know the one right way. And it's a battle that you push. And when you have them for 42 minutes at a rip, you're not working with them all day long, or have them to go back and think about it later. It's just so hard to keep getting them to persevere through that.
Well, I think we can blame Piaget for is cognitivism, insisting that children have a way of thinking at a particular age, so we have catered to that in our textbooks and in our teaching them that things are black and white up until a certain age. Like we were talking Christopher Columbus, for instance. Oh, he discovered America. He was friends with the Indians. Then I get to middle school and high school. Oh no, he was genocide, massive genocide. He was evil and horrible. So like you don't. And same thing. Similar, Rosa Parks. Oh no, she was part of a great big movement to do this. She wasn't just some tired old lady on a bus. She was actually deliberately trying to start something on the bus, but in a peaceful manner. So again, it's just catering to what we think is how kids operate, but we're not teaching them the real thing. We're not teaching them how to question.
Piaget is just a theory.
Exactly. I'm much more of a constructivist myself. So
Any other quick questions? Because we did run over, and these gentlemen do have to get back to work.
I'm still getting paid.
Anything else we'd like to add or questions? Then let's have a big round.
Thank you.
I just want to say,
Coffee. I'll settle for some more coffee. Maybe something a little strong in there too. Oh,
Gift bags and everything.
thank you.
I gotta make sure I get the right name, John.
What kind of juice do we have back there?